The village where the story begins was small, built on the edge of a river that shimmered like glass in the morning sun. Huts of clay and straw stood in clusters, their thatched roofs bowing slightly under the weight of the years, and in the center of it all was a wide square where people gathered at dusk to trade stories, goods, and laughter. It was a place where everyone knew everyone else and where secrets were rare, except for those carried deep within the heart. Among the villagers was a young girl, known more for her quiet kindness than for wealth or beauty. Her mother had died when she was little, but before her death she had pressed a simple bracelet into her daughter's palm. The bracelet was nothing extravagant, made of woven leather strands and a single polished stone in the middle, smooth and gray like river stone. Yet in her mother's trembling voice as she tied it onto the child's wrist, there was a weight of meaning. This will remind you of me, of love, and of truth. Keep it close. It will guard your path. The girl never took it off. As she grew older, it became more than a piece of jewelry. It was her comfort when nights were long and cruel, when her stepmother's sharp words cut deeper than any knife. It was her protection when her stepsister mocked her, twisting laughter into barbs meant to break her spirit. And it was her reminder that once, someone had loved her unconditionally. To her, the bracelet was not leather and stone. It was memory, a promise, and a prayer bound together. But where she saw comfort, her stepfamily saw something else. The stepmother had always regarded the bracelet with disdain. She told her daughter that it was ugly, worthless, not even made of gold or silver. Yet in her heart, she envied the way it glowed faintly when the firelight touched it, the way villagers sometimes whispered that it carried blessings. She did not say so aloud, but she feared it gave the girl strength she could not crush. The stepsister, on the other hand, felt nothing but jealousy. Every time she saw the bracelet around the girl's wrist, she felt like it mocked her. She had fine dresses, she had ribbons and shoes her mother gave her, but still the villagers often looked at her step-sibling with quiet respect, because of the way she bore hardship with grace, and because of that strange little bracelet she never removed. The stepsister would trace her own empty wrist and wonder why nothing she wore ever shone the way that thing did. It was not the value of the bracelet that tormented her, but what it symbolized. Love that she had never been given, a bond with a mother she herself did not remember, and a kind of dignity she could not steal with words. And so, jealousy burned in her like a hidden coal, glowing hotter with every passing season. The girl herself sensed it sometimes. She would catch her stepsister staring too long at her wrist, eyes narrowed, mouth curved slightly. She would pull her sleeve down to cover the bracelet and retreat into the corner of the hut, whispering a prayer her mother had taught her. The river stone against her skin would grow warm as though answering. But prayers are fragile things when faced with envy sharpened into cruelty. And though the girl clung to her mother's gift, she did not know yet that envy can rot even the most ordinary of objects into something dangerous. The bracelet, meant to protect, would soon be tested. And so would she. Envy is a quiet seed. It does not bloom all at once. It takes root slowly, drawing nourishment from bitterness, drinking deeply from every perceived slight. In the stepsister's heart, envy had long been planted by her mother's whispers, her own insecurities, and the constant presence of that humble bracelet around the other girl's wrist. At first, it was little things, glares hidden behind a smile, mocking comments whispered under her breath. She would laugh cruelly at the bracelet, calling it ragged string, or river trash. But no matter how sharp her words, the younger girl never responded with anger. She would lower her head, keep her silence, and continue with her chores. That silence only fueled the fire. When villagers passed by, they would sometimes greet the quiet girl first. "How is your work, child? You are strong," they would say, glancing at her wrist where the gray stone caught the light. The stepsister would bite her lip until it nearly bled. In her mind, the bracelet had become the reason why her sister was noticed at all. Without it, she told herself, no one would look at her twice. The stepmother noticed her daughter's growing agitation. At night, she would stroke her hair and whisper, "Do not let her charm fool you. That bracelet gives her what should be yours. It was not meant for her, it was wasted." The stepsister would lie awake, staring into the darkness, her heart pounding with hatred she could not yet name. Seasons passed. The bracelet grew worn, its leather softened with time, its stone smooth as though polished by unseen hands. Yet strangely, instead of looking old, it seemed to shine more with each year. Whenever hardship pressed on the younger girl, when food was scarce, when work left her hands raw, when cruelty weighed heavily, she would touch the bracelet and her strength would return. One evening, when the sun had gone down and the fire in the hearth glowed low, the stepsister's envy finally slipped into action. She watched her sibling mend a torn basket by the firelight, the bracelet glinting faintly as her hands moved. Something in her snapped. You think you're better than me, don't you? She hissed suddenly. The younger girl looked up, startled. I have never thought such a thing. Liar. The stepsister's voice cracked. You sit there with that thing on your wrist and everyone thinks you're so pure, so good, so blessed. But it isn't you they see, it's that bracelet. The girl shook her head, her eyes wide. It's not what you think. It is only my mother's gift. Exactly. The stepsister's face twisted. A gift you got and I got nothing. She left me nothing. The fire spat a spark as though echoing her rage. The girl reached out a hand, but her sister recoiled, her jealousy too deep to be soothed. From that moment, a plan began to take shape in her mind. She would wait for the right time. She would take the bracelet, claim it for herself, and finally feel the strength, the blessing, the love that had never been given to her. The days that followed were filled with a dangerous quiet. The stepsister watched closely, waiting for her chance. When her sibling went to fetch water from the river, she watched how the bracelet flashed in the sun. When she went to gather firewood, she noticed how the leather caught against the sleeve of her dress. Always it was there, always within reach. And with each passing day her envy grew heavier. It pressed on her chest at night, made her restless in the morning, turned her dreams into shadows of theft. Even her mother began to whisper more boldly, "You deserve it, child. If she will not give it, you must take it." The girl wearing the bracelet sensed none of this. She still slept with her wrist curled near her chest, as if guarding the memory of her mother. She still prayed by the river, unaware that her footsteps were being followed. But envy cannot remain quiet forever. What had once been only stares and whispers was now on the edge of action. The weight of it was too much for the stepsister to bear. Soon the bracelet would no longer rest on the wrist of the one who cherished it. It would fall into the hands of the one who envied it most. The night was thick with silence, the kind of silence that made every creak of the floorboard sound like thunder. The younger girl lay curled on her straw mat, her breathing soft and steady. The moonlight streamed faintly through the cracks of the hut's walls, and the faint silver glow rested on her wrist, where the bracelet slept with her, a quiet guardian. The stepsister lay awake across the room, her eyes fixed on that glow. Her heart beat furiously, her palms slick with sweat. She had told herself again and again that tonight was the night. She had waited long enough. Her mother's voice whispered in her ear, "It is yours if you take it. She has no right to it." Slowly she rose from her mat, each step careful, deliberate. The air seemed heavy around her, as though the hut itself was holding its breath. She crouched beside her sister, staring at the bracelet. The leather looked ordinary, the stone dull in the moonlight, but in her mind it was a treasure beyond measure. She reached out her hand. Her fingers hovered for a moment, trembling with both eagerness and fear. The younger girl shifted in her sleep, her hand curling tighter around her wrist. The stepsister froze, her breath caught in her throat. But then the girl stilled again, her face soft with dreams. With a sudden burst of courage, or desperation, the stepsister pried her sister's fingers away. The leather strap resisted, as though clinging to the wrist it belonged to. The stepsister tugged harder, her teeth gritted, until at last the bracelet slipped free. The younger girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. She looked confused, murmured softly, "Mother," and then fell back into sleep. The stepsister froze once more, clutching the bracelet in her fist, her heart pounding like a drum. But the girl did not wake again. She retreated into the corner of the hut, holding her prize. At first she only stared at it, marveling that it was finally hers. She slipped it onto her own wrist, expecting warmth, expecting the strength she had always envied. But the moment the leather touched her skin, a strange chill shot through her arm. The stone, once so gentle, grew heavy, pressing down like a weight. She frowned, tugging at it, but the bracelet clung to her wrist now, tight and unyielding. "Why is it so cold?" she whispered to herself. She rubbed at the stone, trying to coax some light from it, some sign of its hidden blessing. Nothing came. Only the deep, unnatural chill. The hours passed slowly. She tossed and turned, trying to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes she felt the stone pressing harder, as if it were a burden, not a gift. In her dreams she saw her stepsister's face, not angry, not accusing, but sorrowful, as though asking, "Why did you take what was never yours?" When morning came, she hid the bracelet beneath her sleeve, unwilling to let her sister see what she had done. She strutted about the yard, trying to feel the power she had imagined, trying to convince herself that the villagers would notice her now. But when the first neighbor passed and greeted them, their eyes went to the younger sister, not to her. Her jaw clenched. She held out her wrist boldly, letting the stone flash in the sun, but the neighbor frowned. "What is that?" they asked. "A trinket, nothing more. It looks strange on you." The stepsister flushed red, pulling her sleeve back down. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Had the bracelet truly changed? Or had it only ever shone for her sister? That night, when she returned to her mat, she felt the weight of the bracelet heavier still. It pressed into her skin like thorns, though no marks were visible. She tried to tug it off, but it refused to move. In frustration, she struck it against the wall, but instead of breaking, the stone pulsed faintly, a dull light like the last glow of embers. From the other side of the room, her sister stirred and whispered in her sleep, "It will not stay with you." The stepsister shivered. For the first time, a shadow of fear crept over her envy. She had taken what she thought would bring her joy, but what she held in her hand felt less like a gift and more like a curse. And deep within the stone, unseen by her, cracks had begun to form. The second night after the theft was worse than the first. The stepsister lay restless, tossing and turning as if her body were trying to escape itself. The bracelet clung tighter to her wrist, the leather digging into her flesh, the stone pulsing faintly as though it carried its own heartbeat. She wrapped her arm in cloth, but the chill seeped through. No matter how she covered it, she could feel its weight dragging on her spirit. Her dreams grew darker. She saw endless rivers turning to dust, forests blackening, and her sister standing in the middle of the storm, her wrist bare but her eyes filled with light. In the dream, the stepsister cried out, "But it is mine now. I deserve it." Yet the river of dust only rose higher, choking her voice, silencing her. She awoke gasping, sweat soaking her clothes. She stumbled outside into the cool night air. The village slept, but the wind carried a strange whisper. She looked around, heart pounding, and then she heard it, "Not yours, not yours, not yours." The voice was low, not quite human, not quite the wind. It seemed to come from the bracelet itself. Panicked, she tried again to tear it off, pulling until her skin burned. But the leather only tightened. Her wrist throbbed, and faint red lines marked her skin as though thorns pressed from beneath. The next morning she tried to act as though nothing was wrong. She mocked her sister's simple dress, laughed when she stumbled carrying firewood, and strutted proudly through the village. But her laughter was hollow, brittle, easily shattered. Villagers noticed the strained edge in her voice, the wild gleam in her eyes. One old woman, known for her wisdom, watched her closely. As the stepsister passed, the old woman whispered, "That stone does not belong to you, child. Be careful, it knows its rightful hand." The stepsister froze, her blood running cold. She turned sharply, snapping, "It is mine." She gave it up, she does not need it. But the old woman only shook her head and walked away, her silence more damning than words. By evening, the curse had begun to show more clearly. The stepsister's wrist swelled, the skin turning pale and cracked as though the life was being drawn out of her. Whenever she tried to hide it beneath her sleeve, the leather seemed to burn hotter, forcing her to uncover it. At meals, food tasted of ash. Water did not quench her thirst. She grew weaker, even as she clung to her prize with desperate stubbornness. Her mother tried to soothe her. "Do not worry, child. It will pass. You must only be strong enough to claim it." But the stepsister's eyes grew hollow as she stared at the bracelet. "Strong? Mother, I feel as though it is eating me alive." That night the whispers returned. They were louder, clearer, shaping into words. "A gift of love cannot be stolen. It will wither in another's hand. Return it, or be returned to dust." The stepsister clutched her wrist, trembling. "No," she whispered. "I will not give it back. I will not." Her voice cracked into sobs, half fury, half despair. She pounded the bracelet against the floor until her knuckles bled, but the stone would not break. Instead, the cracks within it deepened, glowing faintly with a terrible light. Across the hut, the younger girl stirred in her sleep. She murmured softly, "Mother, forgive her." Her voice was calm, filled with the gentleness that had always marked her. The stepsister turned toward her, hatred flaring anew. How could she forgive so easily even when robbed? How could she still hold kindness while the thief was drowning in torment? The stepsister's envy twisted into fear. Fear of the bracelet, fear of her sister, fear of the truth she could no longer deny. The gift had never been meant for her, and it never would be. And as dawn broke, the bracelet stone split with a sound like shattering glass. The stepsister cried out as a plume of dust burst forth, swirling around her like smoke. Her scream tore through the hut, waking the household. The bracelet was crumbling in her hands. The scream echoed through the hut, sharp enough to rattle the wooden beams. The younger girl woke with a start, bolting upright. In the pale light of dawn, she saw her stepsister crouched on the floor, clutching her wrist as though it burned. The bracelet, once whole, was breaking apart in her hands. First, the leather strap disintegrated, curling like dry leaves in fire though there was no flame. Then the stone itself cracked open, a web of fractures glowing faintly before collapsing into powder. The dust spilled down her stepsister's arm, coating her palm, her sleeve, the floor. "No, no, it's mine. Mine," the stepsister wailed. She tried to scoop up the dust, pressing it back together as if she could force it into shape again. But the moment her fingers touched it, the dust slipped away, sifting through her grasp as though rejecting her touch. The younger girl rose slowly, her bare feet soft on the floor. She stared in shock, sorrow filling her eyes. "What have you done?" she whispered. Her stepsister spun toward her, eyes wild and rimmed with tears. "You think I don't know? You think I don't see? It was never just a bracelet. It was power, it was love, it was everything I should have had. And now it's gone, gone because of you." The dust swirled faintly, carried by a breeze that slipped through the hut's cracks. It shimmered in the light, rising like smoke before vanishing into the air. As it left, the stepsister's body convulsed. She clutched her chest, gasping as though the breath had been stolen from her lungs. Her mother rushed in, eyes blazing with fury and fear. "What happened?" she demanded, grabbing her daughter's shoulders. "She took it," the stepsister sobbed. "I only took back what should have been mine. But it turned against me." The mother's face twisted into rage as she turned on the younger girl. "You cursed it. You bewitched it to destroy her." The girl shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, it was never mine to curse. It was a gift from my mother. It lived only because of love. Without love it cannot endure." The words hung heavy in the air. The stepmother sneered, unwilling to accept them, but deep down she felt the truth. Her daughter's wrist was bare now, the skin marked with dark lines as though thorns had pressed deep into her flesh. The bracelet had not given her blessing, it had taken its revenge. The villagers soon heard the cries. They gathered outside the hut, peering in with wary eyes. Rumors spread quickly. The stepsister had stolen the sacred gift, and the gift had turned to dust in her hands. Some whispered that the spirit of the girl's true mother had returned to punish the thief. Others said the bracelet itself had been alive, bound to loyalty and love. The stepsister felt the weight of their stares. Shame burned hotter than fire. She tried to hide her arm, but the dark lines remained, etched into her skin like a brand of guilt. No amount of covering could conceal what she had done. Meanwhile, the younger girl knelt quietly, gathering the last traces of dust into her palms. She lifted her hands to the morning light, letting it scatter on the wind. Her face was calm, though her heart ached. It was as if she was releasing her mother's blessing back into the world, trusting that love once given could never truly vanish. The villagers murmured, bowing their heads as the dust dissolved into the sunrise. Some claimed they saw a faint shimmer in the sky, like a hand waving farewell. The stepsister, however, collapsed to her knees. For the first time, her envy cracked into despair. She realized she had not only lost the bracelet but also revealed her own cruelty before all. And worse still, what she had taken could never be returned. The dust was gone. The blessing was gone. All that remained was the hollow ache of betrayal, hers, and the wound she had inflicted on herself. By midday the hut was surrounded. Word of the stolen bracelet had spread like fire in dry grass. Neighbors, elders, and children gathered in uneasy silence, their eyes heavy with judgment. No one dared step too close, but all wanted to see with their own eyes the fate of envy and theft. The stepmother emerged first, her voice sharp, trying to command authority. "There is nothing to see here. Go back to your homes," she shouted. But her tone carried more fear than strength. The villagers did not move. They had heard too much. The bracelet that had glowed with blessing now reduced to dust. They had seen the shame branded into the stepsister's arm, the dark lines etched like thorns beneath her skin. At last the elders pushed forward, their walking sticks tapping against the packed earth. The oldest among them, a gray-haired woman named Olaru, raised her hand and the murmurs fell quiet. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of truth that no denial could drown. "Bring the girls forward," she said. The younger girl stepped out first, her hands still dusted faintly from gathering the last remnants of the bracelet. Her face was pale but calm, her eyes lowered in humility. Behind her, the stepsister stumbled, her arm hidden beneath her sleeve, though the trembling of her body betrayed her fear. The villagers parted, forming a wide circle. In the center, the two sisters stood, one bowed in sorrow, the other in defiance that was already beginning to wither into dread. Olaru's gaze moved between them. "We all know the story of the bracelet," she began. "It was a gift of love, a mother's parting blessing. It bound itself not to the stone, not to the leather, but to the heart that carried it. Such a thing cannot be taken by envy. To steal it is to destroy it." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The stepsister shook her head wildly. "I only wanted what was mine. Why should she be the only one to receive a gift? Why should I be left with nothing?" The elder's eyes narrowed. "Because you did not plant kindness and so you could not reap its fruit. Love cannot be forced into your hand. It must be given. You chose envy, and envy has chosen its mark upon you." The stepsister fell silent, but her tears spilled freely, cutting streaks down her dirt-stained cheeks. The villagers muttered among themselves, some with pity, others with scorn. One man stepped forward. "If the bracelet is gone, then the blessing is gone too. What will become of the girl who carried it faithfully?" His gaze fell on the younger sister. "Will she now be cursed as well?" The elder turned to her. "Child, what remains in your heart?" The girl lifted her eyes, and though they shimmered with sorrow, there was no hatred in them. "Only grief," she said softly. "Grief for what is lost, and grief for what envy has done to my sister." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the crowd. Even after betrayal, she carried no bitterness. Olaru nodded slowly, her weathered face softening. "Then the blessing is not gone. It lives here." She touched the girl's chest gently, above her heart. "The stone was only a vessel. Love remains where love is kept." Relief spread through the villagers, though their eyes soon returned to the stepsister. The black lines on her wrist were darker now, curling up her arm like creeping vines. She clutched at it, whimpering. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking, "please make it stop. Take it away from me." But Olaru shook her head. "It cannot be taken. What is carved by envy must be carried until you learn the cost of your desire. Only then will the mark fade." The villagers whispered agreement, though some turned away, unwilling to watch her suffering. The stepmother tried to defend her child, her voice shrill. She only wanted what was fair. Why should one daughter be blessed while the other is forgotten? But Olaru silenced her with a single raised hand. "It is not fairness you sought. It was possession. You would rather see love destroyed than see it given to another. That is your legacy, and now it is your daughter's burden." The stepmother's lips pressed thin, but she could not argue. The truth hung too heavy. At last, the circle dissolved, and the villagers began to drift back to their homes, though their glances lingered. Some pitied the cursed stepsister, others shook their heads, saying this was what comes when envy grows unchecked. Children whispered the tale already, repeating it with wide eyes. "She stole it, and it turned to dust. The dust marked her, and the mark will not fade." The younger girl stood quietly, feeling the eyes of the village upon her. Though she had lost her mother's bracelet, she realized she had gained something else, witnesses to the truth of her suffering and her patience. For the first time, they saw her not as a forgotten stepdaughter but as the keeper of a love no one could take. Her stepsister, meanwhile, clutched her wrist, weeping, the black lines crawling higher as the sun set. The judgment had been made. The blessing had chosen. And envy had carved its price into flesh. At first, the stepsister felt triumphant. She strutted around the yard with the bracelet glittering at her wrist, calling out for the neighbors to see. "Look what is mine now," she boasted. The metal gleamed beneath the sunlight, but something about it looked different, less warm, less alive. By evening the triumph soured. The bracelet grew heavier, dragging down her arm as if made of stone. No matter how she tugged, she could not remove it. The clasp had vanished, fusing with her skin. At night she woke screaming, for the weight was not just physical. It pressed into her bones, into her dreams. The villagers noticed her change. Her laughter turned brittle, her eyes sunken. Children whispered, "She looks cursed." The stepmother silenced them, insisting her daughter was blessed, not cursed, that fortune had finally chosen their side. But whispers are stronger than denials, and soon even the stepmother grew uneasy. One morning the girl awoke to find the bracelet had turned black, its shine gone. Strange marks crawled from it, spreading across her arm like roots or veins. Wherever they spread, her skin burned. She clawed at it until blood welled, but the blackness remained, etched deeper with every scratch. Meanwhile, the younger girl, robbed of her gift, sat quietly saying nothing. Her silence unsettled the household more than any scream would have. She neither begged for her bracelet back nor cursed the thief. She only watched with calm, mournful eyes. And then, on the 7th day, the bracelet finally cracked. The stepsister gasped as the metal crumbled into dust, scattering across the floor. For a moment she thought herself free, but the marks did not vanish. They burned hotter, glowing faintly like coal. She stumbled outside, clutching her arm, and the villagers recoiled. "Her hand is burning with lies," one muttered. That night, the stepmother demanded an answer. "What have you done to yourself?" The stepsister could not reply. Her mouth opened, but only ash seemed to rise in her throat. For the first time in her life, she could not speak a single word without pain. The bracelet was gone, but its curse had only begun. That night, the village did not sleep easily. A heavy stillness pressed on the air, though no storm clouds loomed. Dogs whimpered in their kennels, roosters crowed too early, and the elders muttered that the spirits were restless. In the hut, the stepsister tossed and turned. Each time she closed her eyes, the same dream came. She was running barefoot through the forest, the bracelet glittering ahead of her, always just out of reach. She ran until her lungs ached, but the harder she tried to grasp it, the more it dissolved, scattering like sand through her fingers. When she looked down, her hands were not hands at all, but claws blackened with ash. She woke each time with a scream that curdled the blood of anyone who heard it. The stepmother dreamed too. In her sleep, she saw her lost husband, standing at the door of the hut with sorrow in his eyes. He pointed toward the younger girl and said, "You turned away the child of blessing. Now blessings will turn away from you." She woke drenched in sweat, clutching her chest, though she told no one of the dream. Even the villagers were not spared. Some whispered in the morning that they saw the girl with the bracelet, her face calm, her eyes sorrowful, walking among them in the dark, though she was alive and sleeping in her bed. Others swore they heard the sound of a bracelet's jingling, though no one carried such jewelry anymore. But the most haunting dreams belonged to the younger girl, the one who had been robbed. She dreamed of standing by a river at dawn, the water flowing like silver. Across the water, a woman cloaked in light lifted her hand, showing the shape of the lost bracelet. "Child," the figure said, "gifts given in love cannot be stolen. They return to those who keep their hearts pure." The girl woke with tears shining on her cheeks, not of sorrow but of something softer, hope. By dawn, the entire household sat in silence. The stepsister refused to eat, her arms still marked with burning veins. The stepmother glared at the younger girl, as if somehow it was her fault that the bracelet had turned to dust. Yet beneath her anger was fear she could no longer deny. For the dreams were too many, too alike, too insistent. It was as if the night itself had spoken with one voice. And that voice whispered of reckoning. By the 9th day, the household could no longer hide what had befallen them. The stepsister's arm was now blackened up to the elbow, and each morning she woke weaker, her once proud posture bent with pain. The bracelet had vanished into dust, but the curse it carried seemed carved into her very flesh. The villagers began to murmur openly. Some avoided their home entirely, refusing to trade or speak with them. Others came to stare at the stepsister's arm as though it were a warning carved into living flesh. They whispered, "She stole what was never hers. The earth itself punished her." One elder, a woman whose hair was silver as moonlight, finally stepped forward. She entered the yard without fear and looked long at the younger girl. "Child," she said softly, "what was taken from you cannot be gone. Tell us what you feel." The younger girl lowered her gaze. "I feel nothing but sorrow for them," she whispered. Her words carried through the crowd like a song. The stepmother spat at her feet. "Sorrow? She curses us with her silence, with her false innocence." She grabbed her daughter's burned arm and held it high. "This is her doing." Her jealousy twisted the bracelet to dust. But the elder shook her head. "No. Gifts of light cannot be twisted by envy. They resist. They return." The sky seemed to darken then, though no storm brewed. A hush fell over the crowd as if all were waiting for what would come next. The stepsister, trembling, fell to her knees. "I only wanted what she had," she sobbed. "It shone so beautifully, I thought if it were mine, perhaps I would shine too. But it betrayed me. It turned against me. Why would it choose her over me?" Her words stung sharper than a knife, for they revealed the root of her heart, envy deep and consuming. She clutched her arm, and where her fingers touched the blackened skin, flakes of ash fell away like snow. The younger girl stepped forward, her face pale but steady. She looked not at her sister, but at the bracelet's dust still scattered in the yard, unmoved by wind or broom. Her voice trembled but held firm. "It was never mine," she said. "It was given to me, yes, but it belonged to truth, not to me. And truth cannot be stolen. When you hid thorns in my shoes, it was truth that pierced you. When you stole my bracelet, It was truth that burned you. The crowd stirred at her words. Some nodded, others whispered, but none could deny the sense of justice that rippled through the air. The stepmother shrieked, her rage unbroken. Lies. All lies. She bewitches you with her meekness. She lunged for the younger girl, hands clawed like talons. But before she could reach her, the ground itself seemed to shift. The dust of the bracelet rose into the air, swirling in a small storm. It gathered like smoke around the stepmother's hands, coating her skin. She screamed, for the dust seared like fire, etching black lines into her palms. The villagers gasped. The elder raised her staff. Enough. You accuse her of lies, yet your own hands burn with truth's fire. The child you cast aside is not cursed, she is protected. It is you who are cursed, for your cruelty has called down judgment. The stepmother staggered back, clutching her scorched hands. Her face twisted not in pain alone but in fear, for she realized what all now saw. Her power over the household was broken. The stepsister wept in the dirt, her arms still aflame with blackness. She turned to her younger sibling, her voice cracked. Forgive me, she whispered. I stole from you, mocked you, hurt you. I thought the bracelet would give me worth. Instead it showed me what I am. The younger girl's eyes softened, though sorrow lingered there. I cannot erase what you have done, she said, but forgiveness belongs to the heart, not to the skin. If you truly wish for it, you must carry the truth with you always and let it shape you. The villagers bowed their heads at her words, for though she was only a girl, she spoke with the gravity of one touched by the unseen. As the sun dipped low, the ash that clung to the stepsister's arm and the stepmother's hands lifted once more, swirling skyward until it vanished like smoke into the clouds. What remained on their skin were scars, dark, permanent, unhealed. And so the reckoning was complete. The younger girl had not raised her hand, had not uttered a curse, and yet justice had come. Truth had burned where lies once lived. The villagers never forgot what they saw that day. They whispered it to their children and their children's children. You may hide thorns in another's shoes, you may steal what is not yours, but truth will not be silenced. It waits. It burns. It returns. Years passed, but the tale of the cursed bracelet never faded. In the village, where stories wove themselves into memory like threads into cloth, the younger girl's quiet endurance became legend, and the punishment of her stepmother and stepsister became warning. Children grew up hearing it whispered at the hearth. Never steal what shines from the heart of another. For what is not yours will turn to dust, and the dust will scar you forever. The younger girl, though still modest in her ways, came to be seen differently after that day of reckoning. Villagers who once looked past her now sought her presence. Some came to her for advice in disputes, for her words were considered steady and true. Others brought her small gifts of grain or cloth, tokens of gratitude, though she asked for nothing. She remained quiet, living simply, but wherever she went, people swore the air felt clearer, lighter, as if truth itself followed her footsteps. The stepmother and stepsister bore their scars for the rest of their lives. No ointment, no herb, no healer could remove the dark stains etched into their skin. For the stepmother, it was her hands, blackened palms that marked her greed and cruelty. For the stepsister, it was her arm, darkened up to the elbow, a reminder of envy's grip. Though they tried to hide the marks with cloth, the village always remembered. At first, the household withdrew in shame. The stepmother barred the doors, spoke to no one, and lived bitterly in the shadow of her humiliation. The stepsister, however, slowly began to change. The memory of the dust that burned her never left her dreams. She no longer mocked or boasted. She no longer reached for what was not hers. Instead, she spent long hours by the river, speaking softly to herself, perhaps in prayer, perhaps in regret. Some say the younger girl forgave her in time, offering her bread when she had none, speaking to her when no one else dared. Forgiveness did not erase the scars, but it softened the bitterness. The two girls, though bound by pain and cruelty, shared moments of quietness together in later years, proof that even from ashes some gentleness could rise. But the stepmother never changed. Her anger festered, her words grew sharp, and she died with her hands still blackened, clutching her bitterness like coins she refused to drop. The villagers did not mourn her. The younger girl lived long, and with each passing year the story of the bracelet grew. By the time her hair was white and her back bent, she had become more than a woman, she had become a symbol. Children touched her skirts as she passed, believing it would keep them honest. Mothers pointed to her and said, "This is what comes of patience. This is the strength of truth." And when she finally left the world, her burial was unlike any other. Villagers wept openly, laying flowers at her grave. They carved a bracelet into her stone marker, not of gold or silver but of simple circles, unbroken, to remind all who looked upon it that truth was the only ornament worth carrying. In the years that followed, a strange thing was noted. Whenever disputes arose in the village, over land or water or inheritance, people claimed to hear the faint sound of a bracelet's jingle in the night. The sound was never menacing, never cruel. It came like a reminder, a warning to speak truth and act with fairness. And often, after the sound was heard, those disputes found resolution the very next day. Travelers passing through the village began to hear the tale as well. Some scoffed, dismissing it as superstition. Yet even the scoffers, when they left, found themselves speaking with unusual honesty, as if the memory of the girl had brushed against their hearts. Generations passed, but the saying endured, "Beware the dust of what is stolen, it burns more than fire and it never forgets." Parents taught their children to live without envy, to honor what was given to others, to seek their own blessings rather than covet another's. And at the center of this wisdom lay the story of one girl, unloved, who endured cruelty with silence, and who saw truth itself rise to defend her. Some claimed her spirit still walked in the village, not as a ghost to haunt, but as a guardian to remind. When the wind rustled through the trees on quiet nights, people would pause and listen, swearing they heard the faint echo of metal links brushing together, the sound of a bracelet jingling gently in the dark. It was not fear that filled them then but reverence. For they knew the truth of the old story, that the bracelet had never been an ornament of gold or stone, but a gift of truth itself. And truth, once given, never perished. Even when stolen, even when broken, it returned. Always it returned. And so the legend of the girl and her stepsister lived on, woven into the fabric of the village's heart, a timeless reminder that cruelty may wound, envy may grasp, but truth endures, and in the end, it burns brighter than any jewel.